Nachmittag, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation and for the organization of this conference, and for Johns Hopkins University for hosting us. And of course, thanks to you for making the time today on this very sunny autumn day. My name is Leo Eigner. I'm a researcher at the Center for Security Studies at ETH Zurich in Switzerland, where I have the chance to not only research, but also to practice science diplomacy. Now, 1 year ago, in October 2023, ETH Zurich and the United Nations signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen their collaboration. ETH Zurich thus became the first university, apart from the United Nations University, to have a formal partnership with the UN. And together with my boss, Professor Andreas Wenger, we brokered this deal between the UN and ETH on behalf of the ETH. And today I'm going to talk to you about this partnership and how a science policy interface between a public research university with a focus on natural sciences and the largest, most important non-governmental organization represents a form of science diplomacy that is not only significant, but also replicable. So you can read about the partnership online and, of course, in the upcoming chapter early next year. So here I'd just like to highlight one thing, which is that the aim of the partnership is not to provide technological solutions to global challenges. Instead, the partnership recognizes the social dimension of science and technology by trying to promote what we have called technology-enabled social innovations. So the focus is clearly more on the social than on the purely technological. And I think this is quite significant if you think that ETH is primarily a technical university. So even a technical university is no longer thinking purely in technical terms. Now, for us to be able to address global challenges, I think we need to find a way to connect decision makers, policymakers, practitioners with knowledge producers or scientists. However, these two groups are very different. While scientists emphasize rigorous long-term research that often does not have any immediate practical application, policymakers prioritize decisions that require timely, actionable information and are often under pressure to respond to urgent public and political demands. And to put it in a nutshell, policymakers address issues by asking, does this work? Whereas scientists ask, is this true? So they're very, very different. Now, any science policy interface has to navigate these differences. And the UN-ETH partnership, we developed what we have called a transdisciplinary co-creation model. We try to create transdisciplinary teams that assemble policymakers with social and natural scientists who collaborate across 3 stages, which you can see behind me. So the first stage is co-creation. Co-creation assembles relevant scientists and policymakers around a specific use case. In this first stage, scientists and policymakers collaborate on equal footing to co-design a research project and everything that entails, so a research question, the methodology, the final application, and so forth, in a way that is both scientifically interesting and relevant for policy. The second stage is the co-production of knowledge. Here, scientists are in the lead. They do the research according to standard scientific methods and practices. But that doesn't mean that policymakers have no role in this stage. They can apply the preliminary findings of the research to a policy context and thus provide feedback which helps to refine the research. And then the final stage is the stage of co-implementation, where policymakers take the lead to apply the research to a policy context while scientists provide support. And this is not a blind application of science to policy context. There are many other practical considerations where the policymakers are clearly the experts as opposed to the scientists. So in short, what you see is that scientists and policymakers engage in varying degrees across the 3 stages and collaborate to bridge their different approaches and expertise. Now, for this to work, each stage has to be underpinned by 3 practical principles, which are not represented here, but they are mutual trust and empathy. The second is clearly defined roles and responsibilities. And the third is an alignment of a vision or aims that is shared by all actors. And we believe this is central because on the one hand, it can safeguard core principles like academic freedom or due political processes, but also scientific excellence and so on. Now, so far I haven't mentioned the word science diplomacy, so you might be wondering why am I talking to you about this science policy interface. But we believe, as I said, that this is a new type of science diplomacy because the field in general has talked a lot about science diplomacy, but it's still up for debate how you actually do it. And what we are trying to do with this partnership is to operationalize science diplomacy, which was also a big topic in our workshop this morning. So to wrap that up a little bit, if policymakers, whether governmental or non-governmental, wish to integrate science in decision-making processes, especially when addressing global challenges, then we must improve how scientists and policymakers not only communicate, as in the COVID pandemic, but also collaborate with one another. And had we had a deep exchange between policymakers and scientists over the last decades, then the challenges we face today in, say, AI governance would be very different because each group would have had an understanding of the issue. So scientists would have understood the sociopolitical dimension of a technology, while policymakers would have understood the technological impact on the sociopolitical field. What with current or future pandemics, digital transformation, climate change, and so on, we believe that the moment for a deeper exchange between scientists and policymakers has arrived. And for this reason, we believe it's necessary to promote models of a science policy interface, like the one between the UN and ETH Zurich, as an important aspect of operationalizing science diplomacy. Thank you very much.